communists were going to take my father away. If my parents were afraid, they didn't show us. But we would never forget our escape from Vietnam. We were lost.
What was your job in Vietnam?
University professor.
We had no home.
Do you have any family in Canada?
No, sir.
Nobody wanted us.
Welcome to Canada.
Canada chose us.
Canadians opened their borders, their homes, and their hearts to more than 100,000 refugees fleeing persecution after the Vietnam War.
We were home.
You're watching Rogers TV, St. John's.
I need you to cue me. I can't see this guy. Is she ready to go right on stage? I can't see this guy for the cue. Sorry, wait, I'm waiting for the cue.
Good afternoon, everybody. I see a few familiar faces from our luncheon last week with Minister Cody, so welcome back. Welcome to today's debate with the candidates for the riding of St. John's East. My name is Janice Byrne, and I am the chair of the St. John's Board of Trade. Having events such as this debate is very important to both our membership and, of course, democracy. And on behalf of the membership of the board, I would like to thank the candidates today for taking the time to allow our members to get to know them and their ideas a bit better today. I am still fighting that cold from last week, so excuse me if my voice is a little gravelly. I would also like to thank our platinum sponsors at Deloitte and BMO, who make events like this possible, as well as all our advocacy patrons, some of which are in the room with us today. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. Please be courteous for our viewers watching the debate at home or from their business on Rogers, and we'd ask that you switch off the sound on your mobile devices right now. Enjoy your lunch, everybody. We'll be back shortly. TV. So to get things started, first of all, I'd like to take a moment to call our participating candidates to the stage. From the Liberal Party of Canada, we have Mr. Nick Whalen. Hi, Nick. And you can take a seat closest to me, please. And from the Conservative Party of Canada, we have Mr. Jody Wall. And Mr. Wall, you can grab the middle seat, please. Did I get you mid-bite? I'm sorry. Okay, and from the New Democratic Party, we have Mr. Jack Harris, who I really hope has finished his lunch. Okay. Maybe we can get it warmed up and have it ready for after you're done. And Jack, you can take the last seat over. Thank you. And now I would like to call our moderator to the stage, a past president of the St. John's Board of Trade, Keating. Oh, man. You get applause.
Okay, thank you, Janice, and thank you very much to our guests and candidates for joining us in this debate today. By procedure, we'll go through what's going to happen. So we'll start with opening remarks from each of our candidates, which will have an allotted 3 minutes each. We'll take the next hour for audience to question the candidates, and in the event that you find yourselves stifled for questions, I do have a few that we have here as well to spark some of the conversation, hopefully get everyone engaged. Candidates, you're going to have 2 minutes to answer the questions posed from our guests, and then we'll provide 1 minute each for rebuttal. So the order of today's debate was drawn with the campaign teams prior to the debate, and the order that we will commence will be with Nick Whalen, followed by Jody Wall, and then by Jack Harris. Nick will be asked the first question during the first round, and then I'll move through the order that each candidate will have an opportunity to be first and last. I will ask that any questions asked today be directed in a way that all participants can answer, and not just a question directed at any one candidate. And we would also ask that the members of the campaign teams do not ask questions or engage in the questions. We would like the questions to come from our memberships and guests. Candidates will be given 4 minutes to give concluding remarks after the debate portion has ended. And they do have in front of them when the candidate's time expires, there's a time box in front of you. You're going to hear a tone, and I will notify you to conclude your remarks. Right now that we've explained the rules, and I think everybody is clear and we've been through them, I'm going to ask Mr. Nick Whalen to kindly give his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Dorothy, and of course thanks Janice for opening the event today, and thanks to all the media who've come to take interest in our riding, surtout la presse qui sont venus ici. Nous nous sommes toujours intéressés de ce qui se passe avec les Canadiens de Montréal, et je vous remercie pour prendre de l'intérêt à ce que nous ferons ici dans nos petits comtés. My name's Nick Whalen. I'm the outgoing Member of Parliament and hopefully the soon-to-becoming incoming Member of Parliament. I was born and raised in St. John's. I studied engineering at Queen's and then went to McGill for law school. After training in Ontario, my wife Sarah and I moved home with our family here to St. John's, where we've been for the past 10 years. And it's been really interesting, and it's been interesting to see how St. John's has changed over that time. We've seen opportunities, sometimes squandered, sometimes taken full advantage of. And what we need to do as a province and a people is come together to take the advantages that are before us. When I was elected 4 years ago, everyone was a little bit surprised. But I've taken the opportunity to learn from you. I've met with your members, I've met with the board itself, I've been lobbied on a number of issues, and I've reached out to learn more about different industries so that I could better represent you as your advocate in Ottawa. If we just, mentally walk around the harbor of St. John's, we can see some of the things we've been able to accomplish together. From support for the fisheries, Prosser's Rock is being redeveloped, but we put $250 million into the fisheries, especially into the small craft harbors, which are the future of the lifeblood of our rural communities. You can continue along. You can see all the work we've done with Canadian Coast Guard. We've created the Atlantic headquarters of the Canadian Coast Guard on the South Side Road, and we've restored the search and rescue that was lost under the Harper government. You can look at the infrastructure money that we've spent, and we're continuing to partner and work with St. John's on wastewater, but we've done so much on wastewater for the province already, and we continue to do so. Then we see some of the towers that have come up around the harbour, and we can think about the oil and gas industry. Seamus, the other 5 MPs, and I have worked incredibly hard to make sure that our oil and gas industry is able to push forward in a new and responsible and speedy way to see better exploration happen on a tighter time frame, under more stringent environmental conditions, so that we can access the markets we've worked so hard to access and achieve through our trade deals. You can continue around and see the battery. We've put a new innovation center at the Battery that allows the university to get out into the community and also incubate more companies, because the future of our province lies in taking the excellent skills and expertise we have in the ocean tech sector and bring it forward to you. I'm sure we'll get to what we're going to plan to do for the future during the questions. I just wanted to say that you've taught me a lot over the last 4 years. I put that to good use to be a better advocate for you, and I humbly ask for your vote so I can continue to do that for the next 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. I would ask Mr. Jody Wall if he would kindly commence with his opening remarks.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jody Wall, and I am honoured to be your Conservative candidate here in St. John's East. I was born and raised in the town of Pooch Cove, and I have lived in Newfoundland and Labrador all my life. This beautiful is my home. This is where my wife and I, Tina, we raised our 2 children, and I want to give them the opportunity to be able to raise their children here as well, just like I had the opportunity to do so. For my past 24 years, my professional life, I have been a group home counsellor. I have worked with mentally delayed and autistic adults, and during that time, I have dedicated my whole career to helping others. I speak for those who don't have the ability to speak for themselves, and the families that we have helped over my 24 years are certainly appreciative of the work that we do. During that time, I've learned to handle any stressful situation with care and professionalism and courtesy, but I've also learned to become a good listener and a good problem solver. That's very important in any walk of life. I've also had the privilege and the honour of being mayor of the town of Pooch Cove for the past 6 years, where I represent my residents. I also serve as the chair of the Northeast Avalon Joint Councils. And that's made up of 13 municipalities across Northeast Avalon, and we meet regularly to discuss regional issues. And I can tell you, when you put 13 mayors and councillors in a room together, you need a strong gavel, I can tell you, at times, to keep everyone in order. But we do work well together. We work well on regional issues, and during that time, I've formed solid working relationships with all the municipalities, the councillors and the mayors in those municipalities. I know the issues. My boots have been on the ground dealing with them, and not only in my town, but in all the municipalities that are represented. So it's quite a learning experience. It's also allowed me to meet many people along the line during that time. Some awesome individuals who live here in St. John's East, and I get to speak with them and know their issues as they go forward. And that's part of the reason why I want to run for the Conservatives here in St. John's East and to be your Member of Parliament. I want to work on the issues that matter to you, and I want to ensure that each one of you has a strong voice at that table. It's very important as we move forward to be involved, to be engaged, and to have that strong voice. It's one that I want to work forward and to work towards, that we help those who are working hard every day, hard-working Newfoundlanders and Labradorians who are just trying to make ends meet. And Mr. Trudeau promised that he would help the middle class. Well, I sit before you today as part of that middle class, and I can say that very little has been done to help the middle class representatives or people here in the province. So right now we're paying more than. Oh, my apologies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Wall. Thank you. Now, Mr. Harris, if I can ask you to kindly go with your opening remarks, please.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Bonjour tout le monde. The first thing that I did today was to look at Greta Thunberg in her speech to the United Nations. It was shocking, but it was passionate and it was real. and awe-inspiring to see a 16-year-old tell the world so eloquently to wake up to the reality of the dangers we all face with the climate crisis. How dare you, she said to world leaders, how dare you turn a blind eye and ignore the dangers and make the young people of today pay the price with their futures and the consequences to life on Earth. Watch it, it's pretty powerful. And then I thought how glad I was to be in this election and running with a party that recognizes that crisis and seeks solutions. One that supports the target of limiting the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees and ambitious, generous greenhouse gas reductions. Monitoring progress with the Climate Accountability Office. Committed to a Canada powered by net carbon neutral electricity by 2030 and a green power grid, one that we can help with. And a new Canada Climate Bank to finance projects. We're committed to an energy retrofit program for homes and public buildings to consume less energy, reduce carbon emissions, and also generate employment to boot, which we could use in Newfoundland and Labrador, where we still have double the national unemployment rate. We're committed to supporting research and development and innovation and the creation of 300,000 new jobs in working towards a low-carbon future with easier access to schooling and training. But we need a just transition, fairness for workers and for those affected by any transition, and that's something our party is committed to. Climate change is not a single issue, but it permeates them all, and how we deal with it defines our future. And for our party and for me, a basic issue is also fairness and building a more equal society here in Newfoundland, Labrador, and in Canada. That's why we have our New Deal for People, outlining our vision and commitments. And I think we may have started this business of affordability, which seems to be the big issue of today, but we started it in June with our plan, making it easier for young people by removing interest on federal student loan debts and giving easier access to training or retraining programs through the EI Fund, capping cell phones and internet fees and requiring a basic plan for a price equal to the world average, delivering expanded health care with a free dental program with those with family incomes under $70,000, and a universal single-payer drug plan. The dental plan, to me, is really, really important. We're putting $1 billion each year into childcare and increasing it until we have full licensed childcare. But we're here to answer your questions and more practical questions, but I want us to see more voices in Ottawa, not a single voice, and I'm ready and able to be that voice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris, for your opening remarks. So now we will commence the question part of our debate. I will ask, Brandon is here and does have a microphone and is prepared to come to your table with the microphone so everybody can hear the question. Ask that you indicate, raise and wave if you have a question, and Brandon will get to you right away. So questions from, I think we have one at the front table there now, so we'll get started.
Thank you. My name is John Abbott, and I'm with the Canadian Mental Health Association. So you can probably guess where I'm going. Mental health issues in this province and this country are at epidemic proportions. The Green Party, I think, mentioned earlier this week, so they're looking at some additional funding in the event they're successful. The question for me is, where do you think we need to go, and what role the federal government should play in advancing mental health care services in the country? We need more money, we need more services, and we need parity with the healthcare system as a whole. So I'd like to see what you have on that front. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, John. We'll commence with the response to the question with Nick, and then following through with the candidates.
Thank you very much, John, for your very important question. Obviously, when I go to the doors, I do hear from a number of people who raise mental health and standards for mental health as their vote issue, so it's good to have the opportunity to respond to the audience of the Board of Trade on this topic. Obviously, it's something that I get to see a sideline view to, because my wife practices in this area at the Waterford as the head of emergency psychiatry there. And our party, thankfully, even though we were a bit derailed this week, we had the opportunity to announce our healthcare policy already, so in advance of this debate. A Liberal government under Justin Trudeau will put more money towards mental health to reduce wait times and create national standards. It's not good when people have to wait a year before they can see a psychiatrist in some places, where they're not appropriately triaged, when they can't get in to see psychologists, when their family doctors are under-supported. And so it's important to set national standards so that people can get the help they need when they need it, when they're in crisis. So although we have a situation where people can get in and get their initial consults, it's important that they get the treatment that they need in the community. Coupled with that is that many people who require, more advanced types of mental health care, who require pharmaceuticals, don't have access to drug plans. They're people who might be in the, say, the second quintile of earnings, where they're not supported by a welfare system style pharmacare, and they don't have a corporate plan that might help them get by. And so our government has been working for the last 4 years to put conditions in place to create a national universal pharmacare system. We've created a drug purchasing agency. We've been working towards changing the Patent and Medicine Review Board regulations to help reduce drug costs. And we're committed to working with the province to create a national pharmacare system so that after people have been determined what their needs are, if they need pharmaceuticals, they can have access to the drugs that will make them well. And hopefully this is something that's going to resonate with voters, and I think it would certainly resonate with the voters I spoke with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. Jody?
Thank you, and thank you, John, for your question. As I said in my preamble, 24 years working with mentally delayed and autistic adults. I have seen what you have not seen with respect to how families are impacted by the lack of services that we have here in our province. Having your boots on the ground, working with these individuals one-on-one, knowing what the family members go through with respect to stress, breakdown of the families, people losing their jobs over situations dealing with family members. This all needs to be addressed. So you've hit it right in my wheelhouse, sir. I guarantee you that. I do know that under a Conservative government, the health transfers will be increased by 3% each year for the next 4 years. That will be committed to. But that is only part of the issue. Education is important. Having people working in these areas, providing services for families who require them. That's first and foremost. We need to have the education is one part. We need to have the conversation and to be open about it, to deal with the issues, moreover those with mental health issues. As I said, it's humbling when you look at the issues that people deal with and deal with them and be able to help with those. I've been doing that all my life with respect to 24 years helping others, speaking for others who don't have that voice to speak, and advocating for them and for their families on their behalf. So I will say that with respect to the Canadian Mental Health Association, I will advocate again for them as well. I have the personal knowledge going forward that would prove to be invaluable in speaking on that issue, and I would like to chat with you after this forum today and just to get a bit more insight from you. But thank you for your question.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Harris?
Well, thank you for this important question. Mental health is something that all of us experience. Our families should be receiving treatment for drug addiction and for mental health issues, and that is exacerbating things, not helping at all. Our party put forward a motion for a national task force on mental health to try to work and solve that problem. We need money and we need resources, but we also need to recognize that that has to be done with a will to win and a willingness to do what has to be done to improve services. We need to ensure that counseling is available through our healthcare system, not simply not simply available through medical doctors giving those services. There are plenty of service providers in our system that can provide counseling, that can assist with specific issues and problems that people have. They need to be empowered, they need to be supported, and we need to provide funds to enable people to access those services as well. I think it's something that is an ongoing situation. It's getting worse, and we need to tackle it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Now, in accordance with the rules, we'll give a 1-minute rebuttal to the question. So, Mr. Whalen.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. And so I guess I should just reiterate that our government has been through now negotiating health accords with all of the provinces. we did something the previous governments hadn't done, which is tie certain amounts of the funding under the health accords to national priorities, including mental health and home care in the last round of negotiations. And we're committing to doing that again this time, tying the new health accords to increases in funding for mental health services. The Prime Minister said it this past weekend. Working with the professions and the provinces to ensure that they have the tools needed to reduce wait times, and setting national standards so that Canadians across the country know what they should expect when they go to receive their services from the provinces and from their healthcare providers, so that there's a standard of care that's not just a standard of care for medical care, but wait times, the types of service that need to be offered, and access to the pharmaceuticals they need to get better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wall?
Thank you. To go back to John's point with respect to what can we do, advocacy, of course, is the first and foremost. Having the conversation. And sometimes we don't even want to talk about, or we tend not to talk about these types of situations. Families have shunned them, and we need to, of course, as elected officials, on any level, municipal, provincial, or federal, it's important to engage in that conversation first and foremost. Bring it out. Bring out the conversation, have it open, and deal with it. It's much more realistic when it's a topic that we can all relate to, and we, all of us here in each room, we can all relate to at some point in our lives, or with family members. So I agree that we need to do more, but it starts first and foremost with advocacy and conversation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. And Mr. Harris?
Thank you. Of course, mental health problems are not new, and successive Liberal and Conservative governments have had plenty of opportunity to do the kind of things that they say they care about today. You know, Mr. Nick mentioned talking about the National Pharmacare Plan. Well, you know, that was first announced by the Liberals in the Red Book of 1997. And here we are, more than 20 years later, without a National Pharmacare Plan. And even their most second to last health minister, Jane Philpott, responded to the comment on pharmacare the other day by calling it vague and, you know, without any timelines, without any possibility of it happening for 4 or 5 years, if it was going to happen at all. And so she wasn't convinced that this was a plan that was going to matter, and neither are we, because we've had experience with promises made by Liberals in the past.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. And I will remind, in the event anyone wasn't here at the beginning of our session, to kindly turn off your cell phones, please, for the benefit of our listeners that are outside this room from the televised Rogers. I guess before I just pop to a question from those that are in the audience, the St. John's Board of Trade is an advocate for business, and we very firmly believe that business is the driver of the economy and is the backbone of our economy. We have called for a commission on taxation together with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and through the Senate on Banking and Commerce. In terms of our members, we know that taxation is a very relevant issue for our business owners in our province. And I would ask each of the candidates if you could kindly tell us what you would advocate for as an MP for St. John's East to ease this federal tax burden on our members who are businesses. And I will now start with Mr. Wall, please.
Okay, thank you. It's one that I'm hearing when I'm going door to door and speaking to the people of St. John's East is affordability and taxes. It's quite important for each and every person here today to realize that we cannot afford any more taxes. In the last 4 years, we've had an increase of $800, as I said in my opening, to the middle class of extra taxes each year. It's something that cannot be sustained. And in addition to that, with respect to the out-migration, there's going to be less people here paying taxes. So we're going to be burdened even more. So we need to look at the level of taxation that we do have for small business. I was chatting with a couple of small business owners earlier. It is getting more difficult as you go along to make a living, and we all want to be comfortable. So first and foremost, we'd have to look at the level of taxation that we have, to introduce new technologies, new industries to bring into our province so that we can have a larger tax base. and give some of the tax break to the residents that want to start a small business. The small businesses are the driving force here in our economy, and with respect to supporting local, how important that is. We need to also have that education part as well of how important it is. A friend of a friend said, you know, the large corporations don't sponsor your softball teams or your hockey teams or your local sports or your local arts. These are the local businesses. So that's where we need to focus for the taxation to help out small businesses, especially here in our province where we don't have a large business structure. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Harris?
Yes, thank you. We recognize, and I recognize, but our party recognizes in policy the importance of small business to all of our communities. As Jody pointed out, they're close to where the action is. They do help communities to survive and prosper and have recreational facilities and a lot of other things that go with it, as well as providing employment to a large degree. Most people are employed by small businesses. We have stood up for lower business, small business taxes. We've opposed, for example, the unfair merchant charges for credit card companies. That's gouging small businesses and their customers. And we also believe that it needs to be made easier for small businesses to be passed on to the next generation. We would do that by changing legislation to end the unfair tax treatment for family transfers for small businesses. And we also are interested in making sure that there can be a single point of access to government for services, thereby streamlining the red tape that's affecting small businesses. We also would say that the pharmacare plan that we proposed, and has been costed by the Parliamentary Budget Office, the drug care plan that was be a universal single-payer plan, would end up saving small businesses approximately $600 a year per employee for businesses who have these kinds of plans. This is an important change and would allow businesses to spend more money on providing, serving their customers, building their businesses, or investing in other activities that don't require you to pay for this, because it would be a system with lower costs of drugs for everybody and a system that was designed similarly to Medicare.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. And finally, Mr. Whalen.
Thank you very much. And of course, over the past couple of years, I had a great opportunity to speak both with the Board of Trade and also, I thought it was with the Conference Board of Canada, but it was at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, was it, that came to lobby us on the Hill about another taxation commission similar to the one that happened under Pierre Elliott Trudeau back in '72. And of course, tax competitiveness is a very important topic. It sort of it's not a great topic of conversation necessarily during a political campaign, but I know it's a very important one to business leaders like yourselves. If you look what we did when we were elected in 2015, the first thing we did was we lowered taxes on middle-class Canadians earning between $45,000 and $90,000. We increased it on Canadians earning over $200,000. And we saw immediately there was more money in the hands of everyday Canadians to go out and buy things at businesses like yours. We saw that there was $2,000 more in people's pockets, and it's true that people are paying $800 more on average in taxation, which allows us to deliver more programming and more services from the government, but they have $2,000 more in their pockets because the economy has grown. Second fastest growth in the G7 without the $1 trillion deficits of the United States. We look at the lowest unemployment since we've started measuring. Over 1 million new jobs created, 75% of those full-time. Wage growth, 800,000 people out of poverty, 278,000 of those children. So we've used that taxation money wisely, and tax rates have fallen under the Liberals. For small business, the tax rate went from 11% to 9%. But I understand that the overall tax regime has become overly complicated. At a certain point, we need to take a look at what our peers in the G7 and the G20 are doing, look at our tax code, figure out appropriate ways to streamline things to make it easier for business. One of the ways we're proposing to do that in this election is by increasing the basic minimum amount to $15,000 a year, so everyone has more money in their pockets to be your consumers, and it's like giving a raise to your employees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wall, we will now start with a 1-minute rebuttal, so if you'd like to have your 1 minute now.
Thank you. I'll be totally honest. I don't know where the $2,000 is to. It's not in my pocket. I don't know if it's in yours. But with respect to, go back to my earlier point, getting the conversation started. This is the place where the conversation needs to start with respect to the Board of Trade, the small business owners. You guys are the experts. I'm here today looking to be the next MP. No doubt I have a lot to learn, but from engaging with people like yourselves, the small business owners who know what they're doing, who've done it for years, who've made a living, and who've done it well. You guys, you men and women, are the people that we need to speak with. And for me, I will be doing that as going forward. It's quite an opportunity here today to speak to a lot of you, and I look forward to that afterwards. But you guys are the experts. You guys have the knowledge and the wherewithal to make this happen, and we'll take it to a federal level. So I'll be assuring you of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. And finally, Mr. Harris.
Thank you. Yes, you know, as to the issue of the Commission on Taxes, we believe that that would be a good idea. It's a good idea because we need to look at taxes and ensure that our tax system is fair. And a fair tax system in our country ought to be one that leads to greater equality. So we have one of the biggest problems that we have. I mean, and I call it a crisis. There's a crisis of inequality in our country. That's why, for example, we put forth a drug plan, sorry, a dental care plan that would guarantee that any family with an income of less than $70,000 has free access to dental care if they don't already have it. And that includes over half the families in Newfoundland and Labrador. That's something that, you know, our tax system, we have to raise taxes to pay for those things. So part of tax fairness, in our view, and you know, I'm coming here to tell you we want to raise taxes. We want to have a wealth tax, which says that the people who have more than $20 million will pay a percent of that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris, for your rebuttal. And finally, Mr. Whalen.
Thank you very much. So, I mean, when we think about tax, I can say unequivocally that businesses and citizens in St. John's East are much better off financially now than they were in 2019. You might have the sense from the media that we're not, but the statistics are there. We're all doing much better than we were in 2015, and we want to continue on that growth. As Atlantic Canadian MPs, we worked on something called the Atlantic Growth Strategy, which is focusing on a future where we tackle our demographic crisis head on, and then we leverage our strengths in order to create more growth. I guess prime in that is the creation of the Ocean Supercluster. It's an industry-matched, government-matched research fund of $300 million together that will create 3,000 high-tech jobs in our province so our talented young people can stay here and work. It's a long-term vision for growth for our province.
Thank you very much. And Brandon, I believe you have a question there from one of our members.
Brent Smith. I'm a resident of St. John's East and a business owner. I was concerned the other day opening up the paper and seeing that Newfoundland and Labrador was the only province in Canada to project a shrinking population in the next 20 years. I think the worst case scenario was showing us a little under 450 in 20 years' time. Can you explain what yourself and your parties would do to address this in Newfoundland specifically?
Thank you very much for your question. We'll start with Mr. Harris.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you raised that question. I was looking forward to hearing it. You know, one of the things that we have to do, obviously, is make life more affordable for people so that people can stay here and don't have to go elsewhere to find employment to be able to survive. So that's clearly a part of everything that we do in terms of making life better for people and having greater equality, because that has to be national in scope. We've put forth a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour. That would cover 900,000 jobs in the public service, and that's important that people have more money to spend. Your Board of Trade has put forth a very ambitious program for immigration. I think 5,000 per year, which is 1% of the population. That's what we would expect nationally to have, and I think it's an ambitious one only because the province is only saying that their goal is 1,750 some years out. So I think it's good that that's being looked at, because 2/3 of the increase in population in Canada actually comes from immigration. If we're not participating in that, you know the direction that we're heading. We have a demographic crisis here in our province, and that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. But I think also having to come with that, and I'm offering myself as someone who wants to work with the Board of Trade to try and find programs and ways, working with the immigrant community as well and their organizations, to make sure that programs are available so that people who do come here have opportunities to participate fully in our society, whether it be through training programs, through jobs, through making sure that they have access to the professional degrees and the professional work that they have training for, and that they can fit into apprenticeship programs or internship programs or with organizations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Mr. Whalen?
Thank you for the question, Brett, and congratulations on your new factory just up the street. Export industries like yours and the chocolate factory will create good jobs in St. John's East, so I was proud to work with you on that. I meet with the Harris Center regularly, and so if people aren't necessarily appraised of the scope of this problem that we're talking about, it relates to the fact that there are just fewer children being born in Newfoundland and Labrador, not just because of how Canadians' patterns and behaviors have changed over time, but because so many of my peers, people who graduated high school from like the early 80s until the 2000s, moved away to the COD moratorium to raise their families elsewhere. And it's now that second generation of former Newfoundlanders who are growing up away are having their children away instead of here. And it compounds the problem that we have from where the baby boomers are now moving into their final years and the devastating impact that could have on our population. We've seen this. We're working hard on it. I mentioned the Atlantic Growth Strategy earlier. One of the pillars of the Atlantic Growth Strategy is immigration. We created a special program for immigration for businesses in Atlantic Canada. It's called the Atlantic Immigration Pilot. It doesn't require businesses to go out and do costly market studies. It allows them to identify medium and high skilled workers from around the world, move them to Newfoundland and Labrador, and most importantly, bring their families with them, because when the kids get in school and the spouse gets a job, they get settled and they stay. And we've seen that this has worked. Families that are coming here under the Atlantic Immigration Pilot to our region are more likely to stay. Retention rates are up, but more needs to be done. We rely on the business community for help in this, and I'm so happy to talk about this with Board of Trade members here today. Seamus and Minister Hussen and I met with business leaders earlier in the year to get them more interested in this project, because it's how we will stave off our demographic decline. We have a plan.
Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Wall, for your comments.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Smith, for that. Outmigration, shrinking population, it goes hand in hand with all of the other issues that we have going on in our province today. You can look at the level of taxation, again, as we just spoke about earlier. Newfoundlanders and Labradorians, as I said, are hard-working individuals, and they're trying to make ends meet. But when they can't make ends meet because of the level of taxation, either provincially or federally, that's been imposed upon us, therein lies the problem. I spoke with a lady at the door 2 nights ago, moved here 6 months ago, can't make a go of it, is going back to Alberta. There's a problem. They want to come here, they want to live here in their home province, they want to work and be productive, but they can't, they don't have the opportunity to do so. So with respect to the outmigration, it's one that we all need to discuss. We can also go back to immigration, and for those who are looking to come into our country, yes, it's well needed. And in that process, and those who belong here should be here and bring their families here to work and to live and to be productive members of society. So when we look at the demographic, yes, they have changed over the years. Far goes it from the time when my father had 10 siblings in the family. Those days are far and few between with respect to what we have here now. We need to encourage people to come here. We have to give them the access to be here and to have those, and a level of taxation that people can actually afford to live by, and to raise their families, to have a comfortable way of living, and that's why it's such importance for those who to retain our population. Again, we can go back to the shrinking population. Each one of us are going to have increased taxes when we look at trying to be sustainable. So it is important, and it's one that I will definitely work towards and advocate on behalf of. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll now begin our rebuttal round, and I will commence with Mr. Harris, please.
Thank you very much. To maintain our population and to grow our population, we need economic development and we need support. You know, we've now got a situation where the ECOA minister lives in Brampton, in Ontario. Why is that? Why don't we have someone in the region, preferably from Newfoundland and Labrador, who knows the problems and can help deal with it, and put an increased emphasis on regional development and that kind of activity? Our party is committed to doing that, to ensure that there are jobs available everywhere, for training programs that make that possible.
Justin, keep the mic up.
Oh, sorry, for training programs that make that possible. And sorry, thanks very much. That's the kind of thing that needs to be done. I mean, this has been going, this is not something new, but what's missing in this piece is a program that's ensure that people do have economic opportunities there, and that requires a renewed effort for industrial development and support for entrepreneurs and new businesses.
Thank you very much. Mr. Whalen?
This issue is so close to my heart. I came back, you know, thankfully my wife was able to find a job in her very high-skilled profession, her very niche profession back here, so we were able to move home. It wasn't easy. My financial agent also moved back to St. John's with his family. Not easy. My debate coach moved back from Toronto to work in financial services. Not easy. It's a labor of love. I love this place. I care about this place. I'm going to fight for opportunities for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians every day. I believe in Newfoundland and Labrador. We're sitting on $400 billion worth of oil in our offshore, and we have to develop that responsibly, but we also have to develop it quickly. So there's so much opportunity here, and I know there's a lot of naysayers, and the media depresses us, but there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. We have a beautiful province with beautiful people. Everyone would love to live here. Et je veux remercier aussi le membre de la presse qui est ici aujourd'hui pour dire à toutes les personnes à Montréal de venir visiter Terre-Neuve, d'acheter une maison. Merci.
Thank you very much, Nick. Mr. Wall?
Thank you. As I said earlier, born and reared in this province, I've spent my whole life here. One of the very fortunate ones that was able to do that. I look back at my graduating class, and there's very few of us left here. But when you look at what we need to do, and just to go back to the ECOA minister, that's one thing that the Conservative government has confirmed, that they will put a minister here that's from the region and not someone from another part of Canada. But spending your entire life here gives you that benefit of knowing what's needed, how we need to move forward, and I just want to be that strong voice for St. John's East as we go forward, and I look forward to that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. And have I done three? No. Yes, I have. Okay, thank you. Moving now to Brandon. Do we have any other questions that are there from the audience? I'm having a hard time seeing you with the lights. Okay, there we go. We do have another question.
Thank you for being here. My name is Rod Pike. I work with REMAX. I'm interested in your comments and your parties on first-time home buyers, what your plans are, and what your thoughts are on the existing stress test guidelines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. We'll commence this round with Mr. Whalen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pike. And of course, the housing market in Newfoundland and Labrador is much different than it is across the country. We brought a number of initiatives in under the most recent budget to help home buyers get access to the market by allowing them to use CMHC to have a shared equity mortgage with CMHC to improve the ability of people to enter the market. But of course, as all Canadians will know, it's in the media all the time, Canada has a consumer debt issue. I wouldn't necessarily call it a crisis because we have a great, strong economy. But it's important to make sure that Canadians can suffer through and last any storms that might come their way in a housing market or increase in interest rates or what have you. And the stress test that we introduced to make sure that first-time home buyers don't get in over their head requires that they be able to pass a test to see that if interest rates rise, they'll still be able to make their mortgage payments. It's important for everybody. It protects our entire economy to make sure that things work in this fashion. At the same time, places like Newfoundland and Labrador with potentially falling home prices may need different tweaked rules. I speak often with the finance minister on this, and I receive guests in Ottawa who often want to talk to me about the stress test, certainly from your industry. But at the same time, as we talk about access to market, whether or not they need the capital, but most importantly, we don't want people to get in over their heads. We saw what happened in Toronto in the early 80s where everybody jumped into the market. There was a quick rise in interest rates, and then there were people who were stuck in their homes, unable to sell them for the better part of 2 decades. So I hear you, because I understand that we want to have a robust market, but I also hear friends and colleagues from Toronto who lived through that crisis and are really appreciative of the prudent approach both our government is taking and also the previous Conservative government took. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whalen. Mr. Wall?
Thank you, and thank you, Rod, for your question. As you were speaking, I was thinking back. I was 20 years old when I bought my home. Those days are gone. I have a son now who's 20, and he has no interest in moving out, I can tell you that. He has it too good. However, the times have changed. At 20 years old, when I purchased my first home, it's a lot different than it is now. And I have spoken to several people, not a lot, but several people at the doors concerning that with their children, and if they're ever going to make a go of it. First-time home buyers is a stressful situation, a stressful time, no doubt about it. And one of the things that the Conservative Party is going to move going forward is to increase that amount of time over a mortgage for an amortization. When you're looking at the capital funds for first-time home buyers, and it puts people in your business in a very difficult position, no doubt about it, with respect to trying to sell a home. But it puts added stress on everyone else. So it's something that we need to look at for our province, and we're not British Columbia, or we're not in any other part of Canada. It's a little different here in Newfoundland and Labrador, and so that needs to be brought to the table for discussion. Excuse me, and it needs to be brought to the table for discussion, and to have meaningful discussion on it as it relates to here. And again, coming back to the experts, to men and women like you in your profession, we need to be engaged and bring them into the table, because we don't have all the answers, but we need to get them. And from people like you in your profession, I'm sure we can get the answer that we need. So thank you for the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. And finally, Mr. Harris.
Yes, thanks for that important question. You know, the stress test wasn't brought in to keep first-time home buyers from going over their heads. It was deliberately brought in as a Canada-wide plan to solve the overheated housing prices in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and maybe one other city. And it was imposed on everyone in this country, willy-nilly, the bluntest instrument possible, and it prevented people from selling their homes who needed to move because nobody could afford to buy them. They had to have 4 or 5% more than it actually cost to have a mortgage. It prevented new people from getting into the market, yes, but it prevented everybody from participating in either refinancing or doing new additions to their houses and everything else. It was the worst instrument possible, and we saw what happened here. The housing industry was hit with incredible problems. People went bankrupt, people lost their businesses as a result of this. You know, so that's a good example of bad management. You know, we had a finance minister from Toronto solving a Toronto and Vancouver problem on the backs of everybody in the country, including people in St. John's and Newfoundland and Labrador. So I think that was one of the worst things that happened. But the first-time homebuyers program hasn't really had a lot of take-up, the one that has been introduced. There are some good aspects to it. I mean, the assistance in closing costs for first-time homebuyers, our party has agreed to and promoted the idea we would double the closing costs amount to $1,500 to assist with closing. We would put the mortgage, and one of the things was done, they lowered the amount of the amortization period. We put that back up to 30-year amortization, and we would also finance the building of 500,000 new affordable homes in Canada over the next 10 years with a $5 billion injection in year one.
Thank you very much. We'll now begin the commencement of the rebuttal round.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm very proud of our economic record. I mean, it's really unparalleled. We've had the second best growth in the G7 without the deficits that are being run by the Americans, the only one with a faster growth rate. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the history of our country. We have raised 20% of our poverty population out of poverty. We did that 3 years faster than we anticipated. So I think our economic stewardship, notwithstanding what Mr. Howard suggested, has been actually quite good. This time around, we are proposing more structured and more, strategic changes. We're posing a price speculation tax on non-resident homeowners, and this will help dampen some of the price pressure in our largest international markets, so Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary. And we also have a national housing strategy, because you're right, not everyone can afford their first home, and that's always been the case. And through our $40 billion national housing strategy, we'll make sure people have the right size houses and roofs over their heads. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wall?
Thank you. This is one of the many important topics that we have to discuss here today. But when you look at the ability to purchase your first home or another home or to sell your home, it really hits to family. So when we look at all the things that we discussed here today, I'll bring it back again to conversation and education. In any level of government, we don't have all the answers. We will do our best to work for the people of the province. Again, being engaged with the stakeholders as yourself, people who are in the know, people who know how the market is and what needs to be done. We will bring them to the table, have the good conversation. I'll be committed to that, and I'll advocate for exactly that going forward for all the people of St. John's East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. Finally, Mr. Harris.
This is a rebuttal?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm going back to what Nick was saying about the economy. Yes, the economy has done fairly well, but in Newfoundland and Labrador, we have twice the national unemployment rate, and some of that unemployment, a fair bit of it probably, is contributed to by the fact that the home builders of this province have not been able to operate at capacity. They've had to shut down their business, and some go bankrupt and lay off people, as I pointed out. And I think that's an important consequence. When you make a policy that is as blunt as that instrument to solve a problem in Vancouver and Toronto and do damage to Newfoundland and Labrador, that's a bad thing. We talk about spending on housing. According to the parliamentary budget officer, the Liberals have spent 19% less than the Harper government spent during their time in office when compared to GDP. That doesn't show a real commitment to housing in Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. We have a question at the back, Brandon. Yes.
Hi, my name is Kim Purchase. I grew up in this riding. No, I don't live here anymore. I'm part of that generation that, as Danny Williams said, the most popular export back in those days was educated young people. So I work for Aurora Cannabis now in government relations. And the issue that I want to raise today, although there's many in such a fast-growing, emerging industry, touches on an area of sort of consensus with the panelists. There are a variety of platform issues that are coming out from each of the parties. There's multiple conversations underway about pharmacare, about affordability, about seniors issues, about the opiate situation. And the issue that I want to talk about today is excise taxes and taxes in general on medical cannabis. When cannabis was legalized, it began, I think, a process in Canada whereby our company alone exports to 25 countries, medical cannabis. We're exporting cannabis, and we're exporting Canada's expertise, its policy, its regulation. When cannabis became legalized, overnight, medical cannabis patients became subject to a sin tax, an excise tax that didn't exist prior to October 2018. 2018, and overnight it added. So minimum of $1 per gram, minimum, that's not including provincial excise taxes, to every person who buys medical cannabis. Authorized by healthcare professionals, overseen by healthcare professionals, fulfilled as a medicine, and overnight sin taxed. Prior to that, there were sales taxes. So with legalization looming, we were all lobbying to have all the taxes removed. So my question to you all, given the fact that the fastest growing segment of medical cannabis users are seniors and women over 50-55 who, with the destigmatization, now want medical care and oversight with their cannabis. Do you personally and do your parties support the reversal of the excise tax? And do you support treating medical cannabis, which is medicine, like all other medicines in Canada? Should Canadians be forced to choose between their medicine and other necessities?
Alrighty, so this round we will start with Mr. Wall.
Is it Kim? I didn't hear it for Kim Purchase. Nice to meet you, ma'am. It is an important issue, no doubt, and you did allude to the seniors and women who are looking at this. I've had conversations with exactly those seniors who are going through health issues, be it rheumatoid arthritis or different health issues that are looking into this, and of course it's one that we're all going to be discussing, no doubt. I have to be totally honest with you. I do not have an answer from the party. I will get you one, and I'd like, if I could, afterwards, we could just meet with you a moment and get your information on it. It's one that I'm going to have to learn more about. I'll be totally honest with you, with respect to that, and with respect to the reversal of the tax. It's one that would pose a very good argument if it's for medical use. I totally hear what you're saying, and I'm interested to speak with you a little bit more. So, I'm sorry, but that's the best I can do right now. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. Mr. Harris?
Thank you, and thank you for that question. I think, you know, the whole era has changed with the legalization of marijuana, of course, and we've had significant problems in implementation, particularly with the sales and the production and all of the things that go with it. And the use of marijuana for medical purposes has been happening for some time. And it should be treated as other medicines, and it should be the excise tax and sales tax, the GST, HST, should be treated the same as other medicines if they're prescribed by a physician. So I support your point of view on that. And I think, you know, while we're talking about marijuana, I think the legalization of marijuana is a good thing. It's a positive thing. But I'm very concerned that we've left 500,000 people in this country with criminal records for simple possession of marijuana. And, you know, there's one can go through the process of getting what used to be called a pardon. They're still calling it, but it's been removed. Someone can go through that process. But why would you have 500,000 people go through that process when there's an opportunity to just simply expunge the record of anyone convicted of simple possession of marijuana? That motion was actually put for the House of Commons as a votable motion and it came to a vote in June. And you know, that motion was defeated. It was defeated because virtually every single Liberal voted against that motion. Only 4 people voted in favor. One of the people who voted against it is sitting here with us. There were more Conservatives voted for that motion than Liberals. And I think that's shocking that we leave these records hanging around. They don't need to. They prevent people from working for some of your businesses, stop people from getting jobs, stop people from leaving the country, and many other stigmas associated with it.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Whalen.
Thank you very much for the question, Kim.
Your mic. Your mic.
Thank you very much for your question, Kim. Obviously, when you say that cannabis was legalized overnight, it certainly took longer than that. It took a federal election and then 2 years of consultations and moving the legislation, putting the necessary framework in place, and working with the provinces so that they could establish their own internal regulatory frameworks as is their right. But one of the things that we've done with respect to all of our budgeting and analysis is that we've imposed a gender-based plus analysis lens on everything we do in our fiscal framework. So we did that now over 2 budgets that have had a full gender-based screen put across them. And of course, if you've suggested now that maybe with respect to taxation of cannabis for medical purposes has some type of a gendered component to it, I'm certainly happy to raise that issue with the finance minister by way of a letter the next time we do the budget. As to whether or not the taxation of cannabis is the same as other drugs, this is something I didn't prepare an answer for you today, but like Mr. Wall, I'm happy to get you the answer on it after the event. But I think it's important that when we, in a principled way, if it's a medicine and we're proposing a pharmacare program, then the pharmacare program should include medicines that are non-traditional. As long as they've been prescribed by the doctor. It would make sense to me. I know that for vets, they have their medical cannabis for PTSD is often covered by different programs. So it's a principled approach. I wouldn't single cannabis out in any way from any other type of product that's used both recreationally, legally, and also as a medicine. But at the moment, I can't actually think of one that would fall into that category as well, but happy to look at it. With respect to other issues surrounding cannabis and making sure that people have an appropriate regime to be pardoned, our party is working on that and is committed to a solution in the next Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whalen. So we'll now commence the rebuttal portion of the question. Mr. Wall?
Kim, you have caused me to think here on stage today. I thank you for that. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about the traditional medicines that I'm using on a daily basis that I require from my pharmacist. And they're not taxed. So, again, there's a light on. And I look forward to speaking with you. It has caused me to think and to give consideration to that reversal of the tax. It's something that I will definitely bring forward in discussion. And again, I look forward to speaking with you when we're finished this today. Thank you.
Mr. Harris, your rebuttal.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you, Kim, for raising this. You know, with the introduction of this, you know, with the new system, there's bound to be issues that come up, and I appreciate the fact that you've raised this and put it on the agenda because even, you know, as I say, I support your position. It's a principled position that if it's a medicine that's a medical product that's prescribed by a doctor, it ought to be treated the same way. And, you know, obviously these things may have to be brought to the table and fixed, but it's something that I think you hear from all three that there's a commitment to going forward on that. And I do appreciate you bringing it forward. And I'm not going to say anything further about the criminal record issue because that's something that is important. It's important. One of the reasons it was done to decriminalize it. There's been thousands of people convicted of simple possession of marijuana since the last election and since there was a government committed to getting rid of it. They're still there.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. And finally, Mr. Whalen.
Thank you very much, Kim. Our government is proud of the work that we did with provinces, with law enforcement, with the medical community, with all other stakeholders in creating a new regime that decriminalizes and legalizes marijuana and has it regulated. I think that, you know, there are always opportunities to improve any new regime, but compare the country where it is today on this file versus where it was in 2014, and it's night and day. So many fewer people are being subject to fewer the police services are saving vast amounts of money by not having to go after people for simple marijuana possession and for other traffic-related offenses, which are now legal. So I think we've come a long way. I'm proud of the work that we've done, but as our Prime Minister likes to say, better is always possible.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whalen. Sitting here listening to the candidates, one of the comments by one, and I can't remember which one, made me think about the oil and gas industry and the importance of oil and gas to the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. There is no secret that our economy benefits quite greatly from this product and this natural resource. Also, the time to go from discovery of a well to actual production of a well is a significant period of time. I don't know the exact number of years, but I know it is over a long playing field. Having said that, the current administration had entered Bill C-69, which has been a fairly contentious discussion here for our business community and certainly in our province. And I guess my question to the candidates is do you view this, in terms of what has been done with Bill C-69, as being the right course of action for our province and for our country? And I will start with Mr. Harris, please.
Thank you very much. I think everybody understands, certainly in this room, but all over Newfoundland and Labrador, the importance of the oil and gas industry to our economy and to our future. And our fiscal life depends on it these days. So I think we do have to recognize that that needs the support of government. But it also needs to have an environment, a regulatory environment that protects the environment, provides safety for workers, and does the job of ensuring that there are processes in place to make it happen. We've been on record in the past of wanting to separate out the protection of safety and the environment away from the governance of the industry and have a separate board. That's a matter of fact. We think that that would give greater confidence to the public and to workers that matters of safety and to the public and matters of environment are taken seriously. We see sometimes a very significant lack of transparency when it comes to issues of safety and of environmental effects, and that does need to be fixed, and there's a good reason for it. There's always been a significant period between discovery and development and production in this province, because the companies don't immediately go forward with their projects, but the process has to be fair, and it has to be has to allow progress to take place. I think I'm not suggesting that Bill C-69 is not open to amendment or change, but insofar as it recognizes the importance of having an environmental lens through which it operates, our party would support it. We think that there may be more difficulties in different environments, frankly, than in the Newfoundland and Labrador offshore with respect to developments getting from one end to the other.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. Mr. Whalen?
Thank you very much for the question. I was wondering when we would get to this, because the oil and gas industry represents more than 25% of the province's GDP, and it's the single most important file on my desk any day. I remember in August of 2016 when CAP came to me and they were concerned about some of the changes to the existing regulatory regime and how consultations would need to be done. We made some changes to the system in order to ensure that Indigenous consultation would be done in a way which would satisfy potential constitutional challenges. But as a caucus, the 7 of us had to sit down and come up with a plan on our short, medium, and long-term goals to protect our industry and get us to the place where we all want to see Newfoundland and Labrador being the primary beneficiary of the resource and enjoying the prosperity that should be coming with the vast amount of potential exploration activity off our coast. For short-term goals, we focused very much on ensuring that the environmental assessments that were being undertaken on the projects that were currently in the pipe would happen, would see the light of day, and even though we were operating under a regime that we didn't put into place, we wanted to make sure it worked. So I worked with Equinor, Statoil, sorry, they used to be Statoil, ExxonMobil, CAP, to try to shepherd through projects to make sure there were enough resources put on those files, certainly a translation or from the scientists that needed to be there, to make sure that the assessments could be completed, and we have 2 exploratory drilling regimes ongoing now. From a medium-term perspective, I focused very much on ensuring that the people who are making the decisions about impact assessments would be operating here in Newfoundland. Minister O'Regan was also really on top of this, and we have an office right here in St. John's East that's doing their regional environmental assessment. This will see a new process where the environmental regulatory hurdles are largely cleared, and new projects can be approved in a 1 to 3 month time frame, similar to our international competitors. But the long-term vision is really seeing all of that oil and gas activity happening here in accordance with the Atlantic Accord, and of course we return the royalty, which was another important piece. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And finally, Mr. Wall.
Thank you. I've knocked on thousands of doors in this last little while, going door to door, speaking with the people. And the people at the doors are saying, Bill C-69, what's going to be done? This is hindering development. We talked about out-migration earlier. We talked about taxation earlier. It's all part and parcel. The Conservative Party of Canada has announced, and Mr. Scheer has said they will repeal Bill C-69. We have to be mindful of those here in this province. The people need to be working. They need to be working, generating the income, paying the taxation, and all of that will be hindered by this process. No doubt, as Mr. Harris would say, the protection of the workers and the environment is key. And going forward, a plan will have to be put in place for that. But when you're looking at, excuse me, the oil and gas sector here on our Newfoundland Labrador offshore, think back to a few years ago when it was booming. And you were here in St. John's, you couldn't get a hotel room, you couldn't get a reservation, taxis were maxed out, business was doing well. And that's what we need to get back to. Those are the things that small business rely on, and that level of commitment needs to come back again to the province and for everyone here. It's going to be important. So going forward, we need to have a look at that, how it's going to benefit us, all Newfoundlanders, Labradorians, especially those here in St. John's East.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. Now we'll commence our 1-minute rebuttal session, and Mr. Harris.
Thank you very much. And this is not going to be much of a rebuttal, I have to say, Nick, because of the things that you pointed out. in terms of the regime and the way it works are the things that need to be done in terms of making sure that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians benefit from the activity in our offshore, that the work that can be done here is done here to the largest extent possible, and that is done in a way that maximizes the ability for these projects to go forward through a regulatory safety and environmental concerns. As I said at the end of my statement earlier, you know, the environment here, having, I think, got it right so far, for the most part, is a good one. And the market and the capital and the ability for us to sell our oil and to distribute it is very positive in Newfoundland and Labrador. These problems exist in the West.
Thank you very much. Mr. Whalen?
Thank you very much. And I appreciate that there's a certain amount of anxiety surrounding Bill C-69. People want to make sure that we reach our ultimate goal of having a short assessment process, a permitting process, so offshore exploratory drilling can be done on our offshore, and we can pursue our industry in a responsible and environmentally conscious way, which is exactly what your 7 Liberal MPs have been focused on for the last 4 years. And we're very close to being at that point. There's a task force that's engaged in the process of doing the regional environmental assessment right here in St. John's. And I think there couldn't be anything more irresponsible than going back on Bill C-69 and returning to a situation where we had an environmental assessment regime that was continually overturned by the courts. Injunctions create a legal risk that will not allow any type of foreign investment capital to come into this country. We have still been battling now for years to try to get Trans Mountain expansion built because of the failed environmental assessment regime there. We're not going to let that happen again. We're not going to let that happen in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Thank you very much. And then finally, Mr. Wall.
Thank you. What we need to remember here today is the benefit that Newfoundlanders and Labradorians need to see. We need to see that benefit here in our municipalities, in our towns, in our places of business. And that all starts from the top down. So when we look at the work that's coming here from our offshore oil industry and the spin-offs that are going to go to all the other businesses as well, as I said earlier, this is a huge undertaking. It's a huge benefit for our. It's one that's immigration or people coming back to our province. You know, it goes part and parcel. So we need to keep that in the forefront, keep that open for discussion, and I'm looking forward to discussing it further.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. So I think with respect to the time, we're at time now for the debate portion of today. Thank you very much for the questions from our members and for the candidates in their response. At this particular point, we will allow each candidate 4 minutes for their concluding remarks to provide to us today. So I'll start with Mr. Whalen, please.
Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the Board of Trade and all your members, of course, for coming today. This is a great opportunity to reach out not only to your members, but through the media to the entire province. As I said at the beginning of my remarks, everyone was pretty surprised when I won in 2015, but I have devoted myself 100% to the cause of serving you. I've spent a lot of time meeting with many of you. I've met with dozens of groups. My office has served hundreds of constituents solving their problems, from taxation to immigration to applications for different types of grants, helping small communities celebrate Canada Day, or helping the Torbay Common finish the amphitheatre. There are just so many different ways that an MP can be involved in the lives of citizens, and I've been honored to have had the opportunity over the last 4 years to do so much. And I've taken this opportunity and the different roles that have come along with it to leverage that value for you. Obviously, you guys weren't the only ones that were surprised. I started in Ottawa with only one role. I sat on the Operations and Estimates Committee. It was my first choice because I'm a bit of a policy geek, but it was a lot of fun. I was promoted to 2 committees. I was made chair of the Atlantic Caucus, and that's an opportunity then to advocate on behalf of all 32 Atlantic MPs before the Prime Minister once a week. It's a very important opportunity, and it's a great opportunity to leverage my skill set. As an engineer, as a lawyer, as someone who's bilingual, I take advantage of the skills that I bring to the table to make sure that when I speak to my colleagues who are Francophone, I can speak to them in French. I can get them on side. I can listen to their point of view. I can try to find arguments that will be convincing to them so that I understand that their shared constituency and my shared constituency will both benefit from the types of ideas that are being put forward. And this is the part of politics that many people don't get the opportunity to see. Certainly, I never saw this opportunity before I engaged in politics. But getting to Ottawa, I see how much happens with the team. You're only as strong in Ottawa as the number of votes you represent, and so Newfoundland and Labrador has to work very hard to leverage our 7 votes. We do it as a team. Minister O'Regan brings his expertise in politics and in journalism and his close friendship with the Prime Minister. We have Churance and we have Ken, who have worked very hard in the municipal sphere, and they bring that expertise. Yvonne was a party leader. Scott is our longest-serving MP, and he knows Ottawa so well. He gets us all very involved in things, opportunities we might never have known existed. And of course, Goody, she brings her entrepreneurial experience and her expertise in the tourism sector. And in fact, now we have a Minister of Tourism, largely due to the strong work and advocacy of Goody. And I bring my skills to the table as well as someone who makes sure we review all the documents and we understand the fine points and we leverage the value. One of the first things that we realized when we got to Ottawa, and I'm not sure how we didn't know this, but that there was $370 million allocated for infrastructure for our province that had never been allocated or spent. The province had never applied for it. Nobody had complained about it, and both the other parties were talking about balancing the budget at all costs, including not spending Newfoundland's share of the infrastructure money. Well, we didn't let that happen. We learned the rules, and we made sure that projects like the $100 million for the core science building at MUN, like Rainbow Riders and hundreds of projects that were languishing across the province, got finished. And so as a result of those efforts and the efforts of our infrastructure regime since then, we've really been able to do a lot of great things. I talked about some of them at the beginning, the headquarters for the Atlantic Canadian Coast Guard, the new science facility, the battery facility, but there's so many other ways that we need to work going forward and in the future to address the needs and concerns of Newfoundland and Labrador. And I think that I've demonstrated over the course of the past 4 years that I've understood and learned from you, and I've learned what you've taught me to be a better advocate for you in Ottawa, and I would greatly appreciate your vote on October 21st to continue this great work on your behalf. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Whalen. And now, Mr. Wall, you get the opportunity as well for your concluding remarks.
As Board of Trade, and to all of you for coming out and supporting this venture. It's one that I was looking forward to, and I must say I've learned a lot from it. Having been involved in municipal politics for 6 years gives you a good base. Your boots are on the ground. You're dealing with issues that are important to the people. When first and foremost, when a resident has an issue, where do they go? They go to the local municipality. And I can tell you, since I've started this process, since I've become the candidate for the Conservatives, I've spoken to a lot of people outside of my town, especially in the riding of St. John's East, and I've heard their issues. A lifetime I've spent helping others. I want to continue to do that. It's important to me as a person that I do that. The comment is being made is stay true to yourself. And that's what I can do. I'll bring hard work and determination to this position as someone from the middle class, a hard-working Newfoundlander and Labradoran like yourselves, to this position. It's one that I'm proud to do, that I'm proud to serve, and just look for the opportunity to do so. When we go look back at the last 4 years in government, you know, people are saying at the doors that Newfoundland and Labrador has been forgotten, and they haven't had their fair share. I'm hearing that. I'm talking to veterans at the doors who are looking for services, increased services. They're looking for someone to listen to them and to hear their concerns and to be an advocate for them. I've shared their stories at the doors. I've heard what the last 4 years of federal government has done with respect to veterans, and that has to change as well. Being a municipal leader, one thing that we are dealing with now is a wastewater issue. And it's one that of course, it may not affect everybody, but it affects a lot of people. Not only in my town, but in Torbay, Portugal Cove, St. Phillips, Wabana on Bell Island, and St. John's. The issue is very real. And we, of course, recognize that something has to be done with wastewater. It's something that the timelines right now that we are under are not achievable. And the meeting that we had just a few weeks ago with a lot of municipal representatives under municipalities, Newfoundland and Labrador, the 7 MPs were there as well. They were invited to this meeting, and of course, they should have initiated the meeting long before municipalities did. Right now, This is a timeline issue, and it's a financial issue that we need to deal with. It impacts every single person. Every person is going to impact financially. Taxation will be increased in order to pay for this, and it's something that we need to look at. I've been speaking with the mayors in the other towns. Everyone are on the same page. We are very concerned how this is going to go forward. So I will continue to bring that forward and to lobby under a Conservative government with respect to the timelines and the ability to finance these projects in all those towns, not just here in St. John's East, but in Newfoundland and Labrador. It's one that it gives you a good base when you speak, when your boots are on the ground and you're speaking with the people, and you hear what they have to say, you listen to what they have to say, you take it under advisement, you take it back, and you advocate on their behalf. That's something that I've done all my life. It's something that I'm proud to have accomplished over my 24 years in my profession, my 6 years on council. And it's something that I will continue to bring forward to Ottawa to fight and to be heard. My line is today that I want to leave you with. I want to be Newfoundland and Labrador's voice in Ottawa, not Ottawa's voice in Newfoundland and Labrador. And my friends, there's a big difference. I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wall. And finally, Mr. Harris, you are 4 minutes.
Thank you, Dorothy, and thank you to the Board of Trade for organizing this event. It's a good opportunity to state my views and to listen to the views of my two of my competitors here, Mr. Whalen and Mr. Wall, and get to know each other a little better. But also to those who asked the questions and were looking for, sincerely, for proper answers to these questions, to respond to the concerns that are raised. I thank you for that opportunity. So I'm running this time because people have asked me to. During the last 2 years, everywhere I went, people were saying, I hope you're running again. Are you going to run again? And I responded to that by deciding that, yes, I would, because there is more to do. There are things that need to be done, and we need more than one voice in Ottawa from Newfoundland and Labrador. Now, you know, with all respect to Mr. Whalen, what he seemed to be saying was that, you know, it was as if there was no Liberals in Ottawa in the Parliament before him, but we had 4, at least. I remember maybe 4, maybe 5. I haven't counted them up. But they were there then, just as they were in the last Parliament. But we had other voices then as well. And we had a strong voice in the official opposition. Some of you will remember that a lot of work was done by me through the Defence Committee to ensure that we had attention paid to the needs of search and rescue, both at Marine and the air search and rescue system that we have. Still, we have a problem with the fact that we don't have search and rescue. We don't, in the South Coast rather, where a helicopter was called to rescue someone, the timelines are so broad that you don't know where it was. A good thing. We may have been lucky this time that there was time to rescue these people, because the incident happened 1:30 in the morning, and the response times after hours are max up to 2 hours to respond to an incident. That's something that does not happen anywhere else in the world, and that should be changed. It still hasn't been changed. You know, we talk about working together and speaking with one voice. When Scott Sims spoke out of turn and did not support the government on a motion, a very simple, straightforward motion, on whether or not grants would be available to organizations who didn't necessarily share the government's ideological beliefs, he was removed from his position as a chair of a fisheries committee, a very important committee to Newfoundland and Labrador. And he was having some difficulty getting himself named to the, being approved by the leader to even run in this election. That's not something that we want to encourage. So we need independent voices from Newfoundland and Labrador. You know, when things happen like the fisheries minister trying to remove quota from Newfoundland and Labrador, causing loss of 200 jobs on the Burin Peninsula, that was not stopped by the action of 7 Newfoundland and Labrador MPs. That was stopped by somebody else finding out the details of the relationship between Mr. LeBlanc and the people involved. So, you know, there are lots of other examples we can talk about. Another important issue, which hasn't, I thought was going to be brought up here today, Marine Atlantic. we have an unreasonable charge for services by Marine Atlantic, 65% cost recovery. I would like to be on record as supporting the work of Transport Action Atlantic and Ted Bartlett in calling for a significant change. We need a new deal for that.
Thank
that
you
won't
very
come
much.
from this government.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harris. I want to say thank you to all the candidates for taking time out of their campaign trail to come and meet with our members and answer questions posed by them. So thank you very much for that. Please join me in a round of applause for the candidates. And to our members, thank you very much for coming out today and participating in this event. Thank you very much.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line, email us, or connect with us on social media.
You're watching Rogers TV, St. John's.
Hello, this is Gary Weaselton of NL Now on Rogers TV, and you can catch me and the gang Sunday nights at 6:30 for stuff like this.
I wish you were home to stay.
In the children's garden, a journey to the other side.
NL Now, right here, only on Rogers TV.
So you want to tell me a secret? I have a little something to share. Inquisitive minds wonder.
Kelly, can we talk? I have nothing to say to you, Vicky.
Do I trust her now? Do you?
How long have you been in the business? 2 years. I can tell.
Come on, honey.
I'm not Satan. You can't say stuff like that.
You call me Captain.
We're not friends. Whatever. What do I have to do? Take a lie detector test? Hold on for the ride.
We good?
You're watching Rogers TV, St. John's.
If you want convenience